Hi everyone, Tom Vogel, Wrestling's Finest, PC Pro Wrestling game. This video here is going to be part 2 of my running a territory video, so hopefully it won't be as long. It's more of a podcast, I guess, on this. What I wanted to talk about on the continuation is basically how to set up a territory, some tips on, getting it going and other things once you're going at it. But when I talked in the first video about the territories, I mentioned there's we're going to focus on a territory replay. There's two types. There's one, the fantasy, where you bring in the wrestlers you want to use. You set every detail. You're not following any template or roadmap. You're just setting it up from scratch. The other one is where I call it a true territory replay, where you follow or you're going to replay or try to recreate a specific territory, whether it's Georgia, Portland, Mid-Atlantic, Texas. We got all kinds of great ones going on at our Delphi Wrestling's Finest forum. We have somebody just started at World Class. We have one guy, John, goes around to about 8 or 9 or 10 different territories, does one show a month. Ed does his Portland Saturday night. We have Bob does NEWA. I know I'm missing some. We have something in Canada. I'm running Georgia. So there are several territory replays. Now, what I'm going to kind of focus on are the actual territories. Only because on the fantasy ones, that's up to each gamer what he wants to do. We have Bob's PWF, Herman has Idaho, Herman has Master Wrestling Federation. He brings in the guys he wants, sets it up however he wants. He's not following, anything that's ever been done before, those type of territories. So for this one, we're just going to talk a strict territory, that many of us followed in the past. So how do you pick a territory? That's entirely on you. What interests you? It could be what you watched, growing up. With the internet, maybe there's something you didn't really know much about that's all of a sudden piqued your interest. Maybe there's a territory you read about in the old After mags, but you never got to see it until maybe now with the internet, or you did some DVD trading. John, I was able to watch, I think it's 4 consecutive years of Mid-South, every one of their TV shows, but I think 1 or 2 that for some reason aren't out there. I watched a lot of Georgia, a lot of Mid-Atlantic. There's a lot of these you can watch years of house show or of the TV shows, which intermingles some footage from the house shows. There's also all kinds of DVDs out there, like the Ted DiBiase. It's like 20-some discs. That gives you a chance to maybe get a feel for a territory, but you really have to decide what territory you want to run, and mainly you want to look at again, something that will keep your interest, or at least give you a chance to let it try to work itself out. Sometimes it can be a little frustrating at the start, but you got to try to give it some time, and hopefully I've given you some hints, and I give you a couple more. The other factor you can always use is, do you have a favorite wrestler? I've always liked Roddy Piper, so I had a lot of options. I could have done Portland, an early Piper in LA, Mid-Atlantic, WWF, all kinds of places he wrestled. So it's your call. Now, once you do decide on a territory, it's important that I think you have to do some research. And by doing research, I mean learn everything you can about the territory. What I have here on my screen is, I'm going to use my Georgia as an example. Again, this is just one way to research. I have a ton of wrestling books, a ton of videos, just like probably most of you have too. And Georgia always sparked my interest. So if you're saying, why did I pick Georgia? It's because I was really into Georgia Championship Wrestling when I started designing Wrestling's Finest. I mean, the wrestlers I first rated were all from Georgia, a little bit of AWA, and also WWF, because we started getting WOR-TV, I think it was January of '81, along with TBS, the Superstation, Channel 17. So anyway, that's why I like Georgia. I really like Gordon Sully. So I was off and running. Now, let's say I wanted to do Georgia just from what I had heard. First thing I would do is probably what everybody does. You go to the internet and you go to Google and you type in Georgia Championship Wrestling, and this is what comes up. I've only got part of the screen up, but just kind of as an example. What I would do is I try to find out when Georgia started, when did it end, and what period am I interested in. For me, it would have to include wrestlers that I know a little bit about. And, most of the wrestlers that went through Georgia are more than likely in Wrestling's Finest, especially if they wrestled in the 70s or 80s. And I know we do have some, from the 60s, but I started watching it in '81, but I like to go back to even, the mid-late '70s when they were, before they even went to the Omni. It was at the Atlanta City Auditorium, I believe, and downtown Atlanta. So I actually go back a little further than when I first started watching Georgia in '81. So what I like to do, and you can do way more than me, you can do way less than me, but what I like to do is I like to know all the towns they went to. I like to try to figure out, where they were each night of the week, and that's kind of a start to it. So do your research, and I would probably urge you, if it's not really a wrestler you're trying to use to figure out the territory, but just the territory itself. If you don't have a period in mind, if it's more like, I just want to do that territory, I would suggest you then make your choice based on, pick a period that has wrestlers that that you're interested in using. Another thing you can do is, I actually picked this off Wikipedia. They had a link. You can also go to Google and type in, Georgia Championship Wrestling results and pick a year. So I just randomly picked 1979. And here you'll see, just a quick little snapshot here of various towns and, the wrestlers that participated on that card. And, if you spend maybe just a half hour, if even that, you can not only figure out what nights or what, like Atlanta, they typically did the Coliseum, or when they wrestled downtown Atlanta, the Municipal Auditorium, they typically did those Friday nights, I believe. So you can start putting together like a little roadmap. I actually would pull out like a blank calendar, pen and paper, and fill in every town I knew they went to on certain nights, and then I would figure, how often they went, and the next thing you know, I'd have a little, several little calendars knowing the order I would follow if I wanted to do each town's cards. Now, the other option is forget all that, maybe just do a TV taping show Saturday morning, and then, do the Omni Sunday night, because when they moved to the Omni, it was mainly Sunday nights. Now, what you can do with that is you can use your TV show to set up your angle, and then, or set up the matches and angles, and then you can run just the Omni card. I've tried it where I run every little town, and I'll tell you what, when you have a small roster like Georgia did, it makes it really, really hard. I don't want to say it gets boring, but it kind of does, because you can only come up with so many matchups so many times. And thankfully, following the territories, you do get quite a few non-clean finishes, which allows you to continue to bring the same wrestlers and the same matches back to the same town. Because if you have too many clean finishes, you would quickly run out of matchups and feuds and angles. So, but, research a year you might be interested in. If there's not wrestlers on here that you're interested in, then type in another year. once you find out, let's just say you're going to do, like my Georgia, I don't even remember what I say it is, like 75, 76 through 83, something like that. What I did was I did all my research, went to each year, and, and I enjoyed doing it. It took quite a bit of time. A lot of what I did was it was in 2000 and, I don't even remember what year it was, 2010. Right after the first year, I got snowed in up in northern South Dakota for almost 3 days in a motel. I think it was about 2.5. And I had all my work done. And so what I did was I couldn't go anywhere. I could walk across the parking lot to a Hardee's. I think I ate, every meal there. They got to know me by first name. But it was just a little Motel 6 or Super 8. But I spent hours upon hours of researching Georgia. And by the time I was unsnowed out and I got home, I had my little territory all set up. So I really enjoyed doing it. But what I did was I went and looked at all the wrestlers that were within the period I wanted to, replicate. And I created my own Georgia file like I showed you on the earlier territory video. And I selected all my wrestlers and I created my own file and I was good to go. But here's the kicker. I want to try to replicate Georgia closely, so I would only use maybe 16 or 18 wrestlers at any given time. And I don't even know if it's that many, because that, to me, that's what makes it fun. It makes it challenging to keep all my angles fresh, to keep the feuds. If I think I gave an example of a Masked Superstar Tommy Rich when I did I think it was a 2 out of 3 fall match video, where how can I gracefully get a heel out of a feud that he loses, but still be able to bring him back? I pretend I'm watching TV, and if you make a big deal of the Masked Superstar losing to Tommy Rich, then Masked Superstar isn't going to be in this bright, oh, this guy's so good. But if he can somehow pass by the fact he lost to Rich and just move on to the next feud, you kind of avoid having Masked Superstar become old news. And that's the challenge when you only can use so many wrestlers. Now, I could use 30 or 40 guys, because I think through the 8-9 year period, there's a lot of wrestlers I have in that file. And, I'm still old school. I keep a piece of paper, might use a spreadsheet for it, but I kind of keep track of the faces and the heels, who's in there, and maybe I jot down how long they've been there. So if somebody starts fading, if injuries occur, or I just kind of get bored with somebody, I can, let them leave without any fanfare and then bring a couple new guys in. Sometimes the angles dictate something occurs, not that I was ready to do it, but it kind of forces my hand. So, that's how I would suggest going to set up your roster. Now, the other important thing, and I know Ed does a fabulous job with this in Portland, you can't have everybody a superstar, in my opinion, because that's not how the territories ran. You'd have, the Steve-O's, my old brother's, one of his top favorite wrestlers. He really likes Steve-O. Not every place had these top wrestlers. You have to have, and I'm not talking prelim guys, but you need to have, mid-card or lower upper wrestlers, because that's how the territories ran. When they went to a small town and they were wrestling in high school, they weren't typically bringing in all their big names. They were bringing in, more of the lower end main eventers, because the fans were just thrilled to get anybody to come in. And, a lot of times the attendance might only be 1,000 people. So it was a way to maybe give your big names a night off, or maybe they were at another venue. It was kind of hard to do that in the small territories because they didn't have the numbers. So that's why, if you're going to run a true territory, you do have to limit the number of guys. And it does make it harder. It does make it challenging, but that to me, that's the real fun of it. No offense to any the fantasy ones, but I'm not interested in just bringing in whoever I want, because it doesn't, for me, I don't get the challenge of trying to, keep everything making sense and keep fresh ideas. And for me, it does mean I get more promoter blocks, that I have to take little breaks, just because you kind of can get stale and run out of ideas, and you just got to kind of hit the recharge button. So, again, that's just what I like doing. Everybody can do their own thing, and but I do think in a true territory, you do have to make a balanced roster. You got to have same amount of heels and faces. You got to have so many upper heels, so many kind of lower heels, and then maybe some mid-carders thrown in. There's ways with the game, with the rating analysis we have, where you can say, okay, I'm going to have 18 wrestlers, 9 heels, 9 faces, or let's say 16, 8 and 8, and I can take 2 or 3 wrestlers that have a rating like 120 or higher. I got to take 3 that are between 80 and 120, and then I got to take 2 that are below that, just to keep the balance of your roster realistic and more true to form how it was in the territories. Because again, we all think, or I shouldn't say we all, I think of the WWF in the mid-'80s, where they rated all the territories, and they brought in, superstar after superstar, and the next thing you know, you have like JYD, who headlined Mid-South. I mean, we're talking, Oklahoma City, Shreveport, and of course the Superdome, bringing in thousands, 10, 12, 15,000 people on a night. He's now wrestling mid-card, or even on the B shows the WWF had. They had some nights they'd have 2 or 3 different cards all over the country, and they had superstars that were in mid-card, and that's not how the territories worked. Now, enough on that. You got your roster built. The tour you're going to set up, meaning how many shows are you going to have a week, and how many matches are you going to have per card. My advice is, if you're going to do a lot of cards in a week, you got to keep the number of matches real low, like 4 or 5. Honestly, otherwise you'll burn out and you'll run out of wrestlers. Your big show, like for me, is the Omni. You always got to know where your big show is, and I talked about that in the first territory video. Where is your Mecca arena? And mine's definitely the Omni. I mean, all roads lead to the Omni. Other territories like AWA, they put huge shows on Denver, Chicago, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Denver. I mean, Georgia didn't have it. It had Atlanta. And then the next one was probably Augusta, but that was like a huge drop-off. And that's just the way it is. So all of my angles, all of my, feud, should we call feud enders, if you want to call it that, end up in the Omni. That's where, your big shows are gonna be. Now, back in the territory days, you did get the world champion would stay in a territory for a week at a time, and he might hit some of the smaller towns. That would be unbelievable, that if you're in Savannah, Georgia, or, Griffin, Georgia, you might get to see Harley Race or Ric Flair come in. It would pop the crowds, but, it didn't occur very often. So, you have to keep that in mind. I don't know what to really advise, doing 1 show a week or 3 shows or whatever. If I had to, I'd probably say just do the 1 big show. Maybe you want to pick, maybe for Georgia, I want to do Monday night in Augusta, because that was, good show, not the Omni, but that way you keep everything fresh. And, in your mind, that these guys were traveling and wrestling, 5, 6, sometimes 7 times a week. The other thing is, if you're going to do a TV show, try to make that as accurate and realistic as possible. Meaning you got to, you're going to have interviews, you're going to have squash matches. I'm not saying you have to, tell everybody you do it, but it might not be a bad idea behind the scenes to kind of set your stuff up through that. I do a Georgia TV show, as part of mine, because that leads, I remember in South Dakota watching Georgia, and I would have given anything to get to go to the Omni the next night. Oh, God, look at this Omni card. This is going to be unbelievable, man. And, my old brother and I would wait till about 11 o'clock Sunday night. We'd call the hotline in the Omni to hear the Freddie Miller tell you the match results. I mean, it was awesome, until my dad saw the phone bill. But it just the excitement of building up. And for us, it was done entirely 100% through the Saturday TV show. We just couldn't wait to, find out what happened at the Omni. So I believe the TV shows are very, very important to kind of keep your stuff, headed in a direction, if you want to do that. Now, some people do that, but we as the gamers don't see the posts on it. So again, you have to do what you're comfortable with what's your time limit, with other commitments. But those are some decisions you're going to have to do with the territory. Now, I want to go about 5 more minutes here, but the next thing you have to look at is when somebody's on a cold streak, what do? Do you bury them on the card? Do you just let them kind of slink away? Do you just keep giving them matches but not really feature them until, something comes up where maybe you can use that little incident to propel them back into your, good graces? Sometimes it's better just to dump somebody, bring somebody else in. And, you don't make big fanfare of it, because territories, all of a sudden you'd be watching in a week or two, you'd say, hey, how come I haven't seen Ken Patera? Oh, I guess he left the area. Sometimes it doesn't register right away. Then, as far as your angles, you got to have an open mind, because I said you got to let the game take you where it wants to take you. If you want somebody to be a superstar, unless you kind of fudge a little bit and, make decisions that are going to favor him, which, again, to me, that's cheating. You just have to hope the chips fall where they may, and I think it's better, actually, not to have a plan who you want to be your big star. Just let the game sort it out, because just when you think you got it figured out, the game changes the questions. It's going to, you got an answer, questions change. So just go with the flow, have an open mind, and use the creativity. I mentioned before titles. I would follow what the territory had. You don't want to create your own titles. I think, if anything, go fewer. But in my Georgia, I have a national champion, a TV champion, and the national tag team champions. I have 3 champions, or championships. The world champion for tag team, heavyweight, and occasionally I bring in Les Thornton, who's been my longtime junior heavyweight champion. Nobody can beat him when he comes to Atlanta, so I just assume he continues holding the belt wherever. They make occasional appearances in the Omni, just like they did in real life. Occasionally they'll go to Macon or Savannah or Augusta. Again, your call on that. Same thing with your title matches. I typically have the TV title, which is the lower of the 2 singles championships. That typically will get defended on TV or in the smaller venues. I don't always have the national title being defended 2-3 times a week. I do 1 main event match for all towns. So if I have 6 cards in a week, I do 6 matches. And then I do the TV show and then the Omni. I may cut it back just so I can focus more on the TV show and the Omni, but I like having the excitement that we used to get, where Gordon Sully would say something to the effect, I'd like to bring out the Masked Superstar right now. This past Monday night in Augusta, Masked Superstar, under controversial means and some questions, defeated Tommy Rich to become the new national champion. And then he'd interview Masked Superstar, and, so you're thinking, ooh, we had a title change in that small town. That is really cool. And that's what I try to replicate. I try to picture fans going to a in a small town, 1,200 in attendance, and they see, a tag team or maybe a TV title change, and they go home all excited, because we used to get excited here in Gordon, make the announcement. And so I don't have a title match on every card on these small ones. Sometimes what I do is I will have specialty matches, because again, that pops the crowd. Ooh, we get to see a lumberjack or a bunkhouse or a no DQ match, whatever it may be. I'll pop those in from time to time. I've talked about the match intangibles. I run the match intangible check before every card, even though I set these matches up where there's 5 matches on every card. I know what the card is, I just don't run the matches. But when I do an intangible check, I know if it says second from the top, I know who that wrestler would be, and then I follow what occurred. Injuries in the game are going to throw you for curves in a small territory, but again, you have to deal with it. And, who are you going to bring in to replace that injured wrestler? Or if it's a short duration, do you just put them on the shelf for a little bit? So, something for you to think about there. I'm not a big fan of running multiple territories if you're running tons of cards. I like, what John does, where he hits each territory 1 card per month, and then when he's done, he starts over. It'd be almost impossible for John to run like 4 or 5 cards for each territory each month. I mean, you're talking 50 cards maybe in a month, and that would almost be impossible. So, you got to try to focus on things at hand. And I'm a slow build guy. I don't like to have everything right in your face. I like to, have the angle slowly build. You're chomping at the bit. Maybe you hold a guy off TV after something happened the week before. And when I post my things out of my forum, I like to have people maybe a little disappointed, like, this kind of TV show kind of sucked. Nothing exciting happened. That was part of it. It brought the bill. Okay, maybe next week. I got them to tune in the next week. You don't want to do too many boring ones. You'll lose people, but sometimes boring is good. It builds suspense. I look back to, I'm sure a lot of people have ordered, tabletop games or, anything I guess really order, but I think of all the games I used to order by mail, Status Pro Baseball, whatever it may be, Stratomatic, and you didn't know when they were coming, because this was before the internet. You sent the check in, and you figured within maybe 2 weeks you would get it. Well, you'd start waiting. And all of a sudden I was up in my room one day, I saw the UPS hit the brakes, the air brakes. He comes flying up our driveway. I'm down those stairs in about 2 seconds. I'm ecstatic. My game came. I opened the door. Hi, Tommy, and hi, George. How are you? Great, because I looked down and it said J.C. Penney's. So I'd take the package, say goodbye to George, turn around, and all of a sudden, I've been waiting for that. Great. You just glared at your mom like, don't rub it in. And now you were bummed out the rest of the day, the night. But now the next day, you were excited again because maybe your game would come. And that's what I mean. You got to have disappointment sometime to appreciate the high points. And I'm a big believer, when you run a territory, you don't shoot all your bullets at one time. Leave a little bit out there. I mean, I know some things I'm going to do with 2 guys, and it's set up perfectly, but I'll deliberately hold it off a little bit just because I want to have the little bit of suspense. And for me too, I like to look forward to it. I like, when I was going to work, to say, ooh, I think I'm going to run that match tonight. This is it. This is going to be a big title match. Everything's been built up. And I'd be excited going home getting to run it. But had I run that every night or been all set up, some of that excitement would have gone. So, be patient. Don't overthink things. I said before, if you really aren't having fun, then, abandon ship, not in a bad way, maybe something hit your ship and you don't really have a choice. You got to bail out, but but give it time. Not everything's gonna, work right away. It is gonna take time. It takes patience, and I really think if you do the research like I mentioned earlier, I truly think you'll enjoy your replay more because it will be more authentic and more real to life. And I know when I run Georgia, I really truly believe I feel like I've stepped back in time as far as, how I try to pattern my replay, as close to what Georgia, showed us on TV and what I've been able to glean through all my research. So this will cover it for the territories. Again, you can post questions, comments. I'd love people who watch these videos to come visit us at our Delphi Forum, Wrestling's Finest. You can just put that right in Google and it'll take you right there. You don't have to have the game. We just have really great, knowledgeable people, and boy, there's some great wrestling worlds there. Somebody's just getting ready to run the Jim Crockett Memorial Tag Team Cup. Huge, legendary once-a-year tournament that was ran in the Mid-Atlantic, and it's I'm really excited to see this, and just some really cool stuff. You really get your wrestling fix if you're a wrestling fan. And if you've stayed with me 31 minutes and 24 seconds of this podcast, you got to be a wrestling fan. So please consider popping over, checking us out. You can post messages, again, even if you don't have the game. It's always great to get wrestling fans over there. It's a very respectful, polite group, and we have a really good time. So with that, I will say goodbye. Thanks for giving up now almost 32 minutes of your time. If you stuck through this one, my next video, I'm actually going to show you, Gary gave me this idea yesterday, show the wild event chart, that maybe how you can use some of those for angles. I don't necessarily say it has to stick to the territories, but gives you some little cheat things you might be able to use to propel you to some fun, exciting stuff. But that'll be upcoming next. But again, thank you everybody, and I hope you all have a great day.